Hey, Blender Bob here. Well, guess what? I just bought myself a microphone and an arm. And, well, I just got the arm. No microphone yet. Next week. And for the moment, I'm still using the old microphone I was using before, my Guitar Hero microphone, with that wonderful setup I did in foam core about a year ago. And it's really time for me to change. And from now on, I'm going to do my Blender Bob from my office here because it's a lot of trouble to go upstairs. This is annoying. Uh, I'm gonna do it from my office because it's annoying to unplug everything, go upstairs, plug microphone, different setup, need to readjust the sound all the time. Now I'm gonna get good sound all the time for everything. Okay, never mind that. We're gonna talk about file formats today. The first one we're gonna talk about is OBJ, or Wavefront OBJ. Wavefront was a 3D company a long time ago in the 90s, and they merged with Alias. It became Alias Wavefront, and then it changed hands a few times, and it ended up being bought by Autodesk. So OBJ format. It's a very old format. It's very, very primitive. It doesn't support hierarchies. It doesn't support animation. Doesn't support cameras. It has a very basic shader support. And but it's really good for if you have a geometry that's corrupted and you cannot figure out what's going on, what's wrong with it. You export it as an OBJ. It's such a clean format. You bring it back, and then it's usually going to fix all the problems with your geometry. This is a trick that everybody does in the industry. It's a very old trick. Export everything as an OBJ and bring it back. And you don't have any scaling issues with OBJs. So if you go from Maya to Blender to Houdini to Nuke, everything will have the same size all the time, which is not the case with, like, for example, FBX. FBX, that's another problem. The second one I want to talk about is FBX, developed by Kadara and for their Filmbox system. And this format is very useful in the industry to transfer stuff because it supports a lot of features. And it was bought by Autodesk, and now Autodesk owns Wavefront, and they own the Kadara system, well, actually FBX file format. And this is the format that Autodesk used to transfer stuff, for example, from Maya to 3ds Max. So if you transfer stuff from one to the other, it's going to convert everything into FBX and then bring it into the other software. It supports a lot of things. It has a lot of support for my attributes because, of course, it's Autodesk, so they will support their own attributes and stuff. But it has basic shader support. So if you make an Arnold shader and you export it and you bring it back, it's not going to support it. You're going to lose your shader. It will support geometry cache, meaning that if you have soft bodies or you have geometry that is distorting, I'm not talking about skeletons, I'm talking about soft bodies or leaves and trees that are moving, you can export the FBX and export it with a cache so that when you bring it back in, you still have the animation on it. And this is how SpeedTree export the trees, animated trees. It creates a cache. I made a clip about this. It was the one that was called Lion King should have been done in Blender, something like this, how to make three leaves moving stuff. Check it out. The link is right here, anyway, on top here. It will support all the kinematic stuff, all the bones with the weighting and everything. That's no problem. It transfers very well. It doesn't support deformers in Maya. Deformers are like the modifiers in Blender, so this will not be supported because it's specific to every software. The big problem with FBX is scaling issues. You bring it from one software to another and everything is either 100 times too big or 100 times too small. It's never the right size. So you go from Blender to Houdini and everything is gigantic in Houdini, or you go back into Maya, everything is like super tiny. It's a big mess. FBX is a big trouble. We'll see later about that. Let's talk about Alembic files. Alembic was developed by Sony and ILM, and it's awesome. It's really powerful. It supports curves, it supports geometry, NURBS, and polygons. By the way, FBX also supports NURBS. It supports the cameras. It supports everything. Well, only for geometry. It doesn't support lights. Okay, FBX will support lights. This one will not. It doesn't support shaders. Okay, but in Blender, there's something special you can do to get your shaders back, and I will show it to you later. It's used for geometry caching mostly. You can export just geometry if you want, and if you import it into another software, you will have your geometry and you're good to go. But as soon as you have an animation, it will create a cache. So if you have a skeleton animation with the bones and everything, all the bones will disappear. You will only have the model animated in your scene. Why is that good? Well, It's good because in big shops, usually what they will do is that once the animation is done and approved, automatically there's like this Alembic file that is being cached and generated and imported into the layout scene. So the lighters, when they start lighting their scene, there's no way they can move a bone by mistake, modify the animation and everything. And it's also much lighter to have a cached animation than having all the bone deformation and everything. So it's much lighter, it's faster, it's safer also. In Maya, if you have an Alembic cache animated, you can still modify it after. Of course, no bones, but you can move some points, you can move it around and do some stuff. In Blender, you cannot. Okay, and that's because both software has a different way of working. Maya has something called the construction history, and you can build on top, on top, and on top, and on top. In Blender, if you import an Alembic cache, a model, there's just nothing you can do with it. You cannot modify it in any way. I will show you an example later about this. Alembic also supports hierarchy, of course, the entire thing. Everything is there. That's not a problem at all. Okay, the newcomer is USD, Universal Scene Description. This format has been developed by Pixar, and as the name says, Universal Scene Description means it's supposed to be universal for any software. So if you have something that you did in Maya or in Pixar internal software, whatever they use, and you bring it into Blender or in Houdini, it's supposed to all work. Everything is supposed to connect, everything, the bones, the shaders, everything is supposed to work. That's the theory. Shaders, every renderer has their own system, so it's not that easy to connect everything together. I mean, in RenderMan, if you take, for example, the Disney shader in RenderMan, there's a shader called the Disney shader. It's pretty much the same setup as the principal BSDF in Blender. So it's the same settings, the same connections, the same everything, and you can just reconnect your diffuse and your roughness and all your other things and normals, everything in there, and it looks exactly the same. I tried it with RenderMan and Cycles. It just looks exactly the same. Okay. So yes, some shader conversion could work. I saw some crazy demos on Houdini with Alembic where you could have like functions that are built into the Alembic, and you can lock some stuff, and you can say, for example, I give you the right to change only this parameter, but everything else is locked, and you can password protect some stuff. It's completely insane. It's a huge format, but it's also very complicated. Blender can export in USD to some level. I mean, I'm sure it's not all feature complete because it's a new thing, and but we cannot import in Blender USD yet. It's probably going to come with a Blender 3.0. I hope so. I really do. So it will support hierarchy, it will support bones, it will support everything. It's so new that in Maya, they started to support it in Maya 2022. We are in 2022 as I record this. Okay, Blender had it like about a year ago. They started to export in USD. So I haven't played with it yet, but it looks like it's going to be pretty cool. It's like Alembic on steroids. The files are also smaller than Alembic, and they are faster to process. VDB was developed by DreamWorks. It's a format that is used for smoke, fire, and water simulations. It's open source now, and it's supported by every major software and every renderer. We have it in Blender. Hey! Now, you can make a smoke simulation in Houdini and fire and explosion, and you export your VDB into Blender, try to render it, it's not going to look the same. You can import it into Maya, use an Arnold shader on it, it's not going to look the same. Okay, so this is all very, very dependent on the shader. The geometry, well, not the geometry, but the information is the same. You have your voxels, you have the temperature, you have the density, and you have some parameters and everything, but they will look completely different from one renderer to another, which is kind of a problem, because it would be nice if it could be kind of, all the same, but it's not the case. So live with it. There are many other formats available out there. There's Collada, which is kind of similar to FBX, and it's supposed to be able to support a lot of things and everything. I don't know. I never used it, and in the VFX industry, I don't think anybody uses Collada, so maybe it's for gaming. I don't know what it's for. I have no idea. There's a SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, and this is used to transfer software from, example, Adobe Illustrator to Blender. This is the format you need to use. There's STL, which stands for Standard Tessellation Language or Standard Triangle Language. And this is used for 3D printing, so it's a very, very raw format, just triangles. It doesn't support anything else. It's just polygons. What else we got? We got the GLTF. That's also now an open format, and it was developed by the same people who did Collada, and they also try to convert everything from one software to another to be able to support everything, but I never used it, and I don't know anybody who uses it, so I don't know. Cannot use everything. I mean, I'm happy with what I have. What can I say? Okay, let's take a look at the formats, because this is the theory. Let's see in practical what's going on, because it's not always pure joy. Okay, we're going to experiment with FBX. I'm going to start with this file test that I made, and I'm going to use the default settings. So these are the default settings in Blender with the FBX add-on. So I import it, and this is what I get. By the way, this file comes from a software called Anima, which is a crowd-generating software. Now it works. The bones are in a weird position, but surprisingly it works. But yeah, kind of looks strange, and it's going to be hard to modify with the bones in this orientation. So let's try another option. So let's see if we can get a better result if we turn on automatic bone orientation. So that should work. So let's give it a try. Okay, so the bones are properly oriented, but look at the animation on the arms and everything. The animation is completely screwed up. They look like zombies. Let's try another option, ignore leaf bones. I have no idea what this is, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so we got rid of the bones that was coming out of the head, but we still have a problem with the animation. They still look like zombies. Alright, one more, force connect children. Let's see what this does. And we have a winner. Everything is working properly. The animation is back to normal. Yeah, we're happy. There's an option called Apply Transformation. This is used when you have a software that is working like Y up, like Maya and Houdini, and you import it into a software that is Z up, like Blender. Well, didn't work well for this, but we're going to talk more about this later. There is one more possibility we can try. It's an add-on called Better FBX. Now you have to buy it, and it's right here. I loaded it already, Better FBX. Let's see what it does. I'm just going to select this. I'm going to change the scale because I know I need to put it to 1, otherwise everything's going to be too small. And I'm going to leave everything by default. Okay, so we have a bone coming out of the head, but it's straight. What else? The shaders look different. Why is that? Let's take a look at the shaders. If we take a look at something that comes from the Blender FBX add-on, you can see that everything was connected. So I got something in the specular, I got something in the alpha, and I got the bump map and the color. Everything is there. For the Better FBX add-on, if I take a look at it, you can see that only the color has been connected. That's why it doesn't look so good. So now you're going to say, well, why would I want to have an add-on called Better FBX if it's not actually better? Well, here's the reason. The Better FBX add-on will support FBX caches for animated geometry. The Blender add-on will not. Also, it supports wavefront OBJs, but in a better way than the Blender add-on. I will show you later. And also, it supports 3ds format. So if you have something from 3ds Max, you can import it into Blender. But for the FBX, it also makes a big difference for the cameras. This is my test file. I'm making it from Maya because, you know, FBX, Maya, Autodesk, it's the best software to export an FBX from. So the camera is just moving from left to right. But we're going to set up some settings on the camera to make sure that everything translates properly, because cameras can be tricky. I changed the focal length to 45.348, that's an arbitrary number, just to see if it's going to translate properly. I'm also going to change the film back. In Maya it's called the camera aperture, and this is the size of the sensor of the camera. So you can have a small sensor or big sensor depending on the camera, and that changes everything for the field of view. In a few weeks I will make a Blender Bob about lenses, and I will explain all this stuff in details. I use the size of a sensor of an Alexa Mini when you shoot at 4K. When I exported it in Maya, I made sure that the scale was at 1. In Blender, I also made sure that the scale was at 1 because I want to make sure it's going to be okay, it's going to match. Oh, I need to, yeah, animation is on, so import FBX, and everything is super tiny. Okay, just to make sure, I will create a cube, just a default cube, to see how big it is, you know, and well, yeah, it is very, very small, it's very tiny. So what if I pick up my cube? Oh, you see the scaling is at 0.01. So I will change it back to 1, and I will do the same thing with the camera. So 1, and the camera also, oh, there's an animation on it. So I will delete the animation because actually I cannot delete the animation because I need the animation on the camera. But just for the sake of it, I'm going to try to scale it. and of course it's not at the right place at all. So one thing I could do is to parent everything under an empty and just scale it 100 times bigger, but we don't want to do this. We don't want to do this extra step. There must be a way. Yeah, there is a way. So I'll import everything again, but I'm going to put the scale to 100 this time. Now I get something that makes sense. And the camera is moving, but it's pointing in the wrong direction. Of course, I did send a bug report. Turns out it was a duplicate. Somebody already sent that bug report in 2015. Let's try with the Better FBX add-on, and I'm going to put the scale to 1 also. Oh, this one works at the scale of 1, and the camera is moving properly. If we compare the import from Blender FBX and Better FBX add-on, you can see there's a difference between the two cameras. Well, of course, the Blender one is pointing in the wrong direction, but not only that, there's something funky going on here. How come they are not perfectly aligned? If we take a look at the Better FBX, we can see the in-out tangent here. You see, it's a very smooth animation. If we look at the one in Blender, it's a linear animation. So the Blender add-on didn't support the Bezier interpolation. That's a major issue. If I manually change interpolation, you can see that now the two cameras are perfectly aligned. Now let's not forget the camera information. With the Blender add-on, the focal length is good and the sensor size is good, but with Better FBX, the focal length is wrong and the sensor size is good. So how do we deal with that situation? Well, there's only one way to do it. You import everything twice. The first time with the Blender add-on, so you get the right shaders and you get the right focal length. And then you import everything again with the Better FBX add-on, so you get the right animation, the camera pointing in the right direction, but then you need to copy all the shaders from the Blender add-on to the Better FBX geometry, and you take the camera information for the focal length that was imported from Blender to the camera that was imported with Better FBX. FBX is hell, it's hell. And now we're just going from Maya to Blender. But when you go to Houdini, everything blows up. And then if you have an animated camera, you animate the focal length, forget about it, okay? And you go to Nuke and you get another set of problems. It's just hell. FBX is hell. I also exported the same file as in Alembic, and when you try it, everything works. The camera is in the right position, the focal length is good, everything works, the animation curves, everything is perfect. We love Alembic. Now we're going to try the opposite. I created the same file with the cube and the camera moving in Blender, and I exported it as an FBX and an Alembic, and I'm going to try to see how it works in other software. So let's try with the Alembic in Maya. Alright, so import Alembic here. Import, and it works. The scale is good, the animation is there. Let's select the camera, and the focal length is good, and the aperture is okay too. It worked perfectly. Import FBX from Blender. Everything is 100 times too big. Now let's select the camera to see if the camera information is good. Camera here. So the focal length is good, it's animated, I don't know why, and I could see that, you see the scale is at 100, and I could see also that the camera aperture is good. I will export again from Blender, but I will put the scale at 0.01, and import again. Now this time it's working, the camera fits perfectly with the Alembic one. Oh, I spoke too fast, there's something wrong here. And the problem is that the animation is for some reason offsetted by 1 frame, and this happens in both directions. There's something wrong with FBX, you import something, the animation gets offset by 1 frame. You see, I fixed it and now it's good. Now we're going to import all that stuff from both Maya and Blender into Nuke. I can already tell you that everything worked perfectly with the Alembic, and for the FBX coming from Maya, also the animation was offset by 1 frame. The Alembic from Blender didn't cause any issues, everything was there, focal length and everything, it all worked. Now let's try the FBX from Blender, and where is it? There it is. Okay, so it's 100 times bigger as we expected, but the camera has a 90-degree rotation on it, so it's not good. Now let's try the export from Better FBX. The scale is good, but the orientation is wrong. So exporting cameras from Blender to Nuke using FBX, not a good idea. Just use Alembic, it always works. Actually, it's not totally true, because if in Blender you are set up to 23.98 frames per second and you go into Nuke also at 23.98 frames per second, it's not gonna work. It expected to be at 24. You need to put everything at 24 for it to work. And that's not good, because if the project is set up for 2398, there's a reason for it, and it should stay like this, but that doesn't work well. Another problem. Let's take a 15-second break. Oh my god, that was so that was so boring. Okay, now all these issues that we have with cameras turned 90 degrees in the wrong angle and everything, it all comes from one issue. And that issue is that Blender works Z up, and Maya and Houdini and ZBrush and Nuke, they work Y up. When you make a graphic, it's always the same thing. The horizontal axis is X and the vertical axis is Y. It's never Z, it's Y. Gee, I'm losing my hair so much. Yeah, I know, 3ds Max, Unreal, Unity, they all work Z up. But I don't care, I don't use these software. I'm being very selfish here. I work in the VFX industry and they all work Y up except for 3ds Max. But I think only Skyline uses 3ds Max for big shots. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is every day we have to deal with this issue from one software to the other, and it gives us a lot of trouble. And if Blender wants to take its place in the big leagues, they will have to address the situation eventually. 3.0 maybe? Let me show you more examples of the problems we get because we're working Z up. I have a tire here, and since I'm Canadian, that would be a Canadian tire. You need to be Canadian to get that joke. Okay, I'm going to add a driver here. I'm going to select the torus as a driver. I'm going to use a rotation in X. And now that means that if I rotate my torus here, the tire will spin with it. We need to do some changes on this tire, and we don't have anybody to do it in the office because we're all too busy. So we give it to a freelancer, and this guy only works in ZBrush. So we're going to pretend that what we're doing next is actually done in ZBrush. Oh wow, this guy working in ZBrush is so talented. Look at this, it's so realistic. I really buy it as a flat tire. Oh my god. Back in Blender, we're going to import that tire. Okay, so it's right there. Now let's copy the driver that we had here. So I'm just going to go copy driver, select the other object, and paste the driver. And poof! Oh, we have a problem. It just rotated 90 degrees. What is going on? Let's undo, and we can see that there's a rotation of 90 degrees in X, and that's because of the translation going from Y up to Z up. There's an easy fix. You just need to apply the transformation first, so you will go into objects and apply the rotations, and now all you have to do is to copy your driver, and now everything is working properly. If I rotate the torus, both tires will turn in sync. Okay, so you just need to apply the transformation. What's the big deal? Move on. Well, that's a static object. What happens if you have an animated object? In Maya, I get this animated object here. So you can see here it has a rotation of 15 degrees. Here it's at 0 and here it's at minus 30. I exported the animation as an FBX and now I'm bringing it into Blender. So what's the result of this? Here, import, you can see it looks like it's okay. It looks like it's doing the right thing, but the animation starts at 1 to 10 instead of 0 to 9 like in Maya. That's the first problem. Second thing, you can see that the rotation of the plane, instead of being at 15, it's at 105, so it added 90 degrees to compensate. Now, if I copy the animation data from one plane to the other, well, this is what happens. The plane is rotated 90 degrees. So we cannot just copy the animation. There's an easy way to fix that. We're going to import our FBX here, but now we're going to turn on the apply transformation. It didn't work for the bones, but for this, let's see what it's going to do. I'm going to scale it to 100, otherwise it's going to be too tiny. So import FBX, and now if I select my plane, you can see that the rotation is at 15, at 0 degree, and at 30 degrees, minus 30 as expected. Okay, two more things. I'm going to take a model from Maya. It's a car that has all the hierarchy and all the parts are separate and everything, and I'm going to import it into Blender. This is imported with the standard OBJ add-on that comes with Blender. So I import the geometry. You can see the car is here, but I don't have the hierarchy. Everything is just in one big chunk. The only thing I can do is to bring everything into edit mode and separate the mesh by material. So it works, but I don't have proper names on the objects. Everything is called rogue from Maya 001, 002, 003. That's the name of the file. Now I will try with the Better FBX plugin, because I told you the Better FBX plugin can also import OBJ files. Okay, so I forgot to change the scale. It was by default at 0.001. My car is tiny, but you can see all the names are there. Everything is like the original file. So as weird as it sounds, use Better FBX to import OBJs. I also told you that there's a way to deal with the shaders with an Alembic file in Blender, and this is something that only works in Blender. So let me show you. Okay, so we have the woman here. This is the skeleton version, all the bones and everything. We're going to export it as an Alembic file. So Alembic, we're going to tweak a few things. So start frame and frame 1 to 60, that's good. Selected only because we don't want all the cameras and all the crap in the scene. And face set, this is the most important thing. So you export your Alembic file. And this is where the magic happens. We're going to import it back as an Alembic, of course. So import Alembic, get the woman, import. And well, I cannot move it. I said this before, once you have an Alembic loaded in the scene, you cannot move it, you cannot do anything. Whoops, previous clash. So the only way to fix that is to create an empty, and parent everything to the empty, and now I can move it. So parent, keep transformation, and I move the empty, I can move the woman around. Now you see that because we had the face set option turned on, all the shaders have been applied automatically, and this is absolutely wonderful. But it's really important that you import your Alembic while you still have the FBX version, well, the shaded version in it, so that it can assign the shaders automatically. Otherwise you're screwed. So now that you have it, you can delete the old FBX imported version and you can save your file as a blend file. 20 minutes ago I told you that I would show you how you can modify cached Alembic files in Maya, and this is something that would be very cool if we could do this in Blender. This is the Alembic file that we exported from Blender. It's the exact same thing. If I try to move her around, I cannot do it because everything is driven by the Alembic here. So what we did in Blender was to create an empty and parent the geometry. In Maya, it's the same thing as creating a group. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. But if I try to move it around, it doesn't work. So Blender 1, Maya 0. But if I go on the geometry level, that's another story. So I'm going to select some points here and I'm going to keyframe them. I'm going to move on the timeline and do another keyframe here. And look at this, we've been able to modify an object that is driven by an Alembic cache. So Blender 1, Maya 1, they both have advantages and disadvantages. This can be very useful if you do cloth simulation. You can have a lot of interpenetration, sometimes that happens, and if everything is done, everything is prepared, you do your render, you do your quality check, and you realize, oh gee, there's a little bit of skin popping out here. So instead of going back to the CFX department, CFX is cloth department, and having them to fix it and then sending it back and then redo it again, it's much easier to just fix it directly on the Alembic and then re-render the file. And this is what we did a lot on Welcome to Marwan. We were dealing with multiple layers of clothes, and we had to fix so many things. If we had to go back all the time to the CFX department, we would have never been able to deliver on time. That's enough. I got a headache. I'm done. No more. Bye. I'm gonna stop here because I know that by now probably 95% of the people watching this already stopped because they were like, this is too much for me, or it doesn't concern me, or it's like, ugh. But if you're still here, hey, write, I don't know, write cookie in the comments just to see. All right, so yeah, I still had like 20 minutes of footage of problems and importing, exporting stuff, scale and hierarchy that don't work, and translations and everything. I'm going to stop now, okay? The point of this entire thing is that there's no magical way to transfer stuff from one software to another. It's a lot of problem. And the biggest part of this is the inability for Blender to work YUP. Even me, I'm confused. YUP. So if you run into some problems, I made this nice little graphic here that helps you figure out what is the best way to transfer from one software to another. Just follow the arrows. Yes, I know, if you look at a table, the x-axis and the y-axis are both horizontal. But nobody looks at tables anymore. We all look at screens, and on screens, the y-axis is up. Just saying.